of the orientation. So what I will do is I will just send all the materials together so that if you want to save it in an email folder, you've got everything in one spot. So I think that is the housekeeping items addressed. I will just ensure that our captions are enabled if that's something you'd like to enable on your own screen. So I think we are good there. You should be able to see that on your Zoom. Okay, let's get into it. I firstly just wanted to gratefully acknowledge that I'm here on the traditional unceded lands of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish peoples today, as I'm presenting to you, and really am thankful for the opportunity to live and work on those lands. So what I wanted to hopefully guide us through today in our group is, as you see here, add a little bit more detail compared to what we spoke about in December 2021, when we had our preceptor orientation session number 1, I very imaginatively called it, just to really get us all on the same page and walk through what these placements are going to look like next month, because things are a lot closer now. And so we do have more details to share, which we hope will be helpful. I will reference some of the things we talked about in December as well, for those of you who weren't able to join us for that original session. So what I've experimented with today as a format is we have a course syllabus, which probably is a familiar word since we've all taken university courses at one point in our lives. So that's a really long, wordy document. So I've tried to liven that up, but just really give you the essence of what the placements are going to look like week by week for the students and for you. So I'm hoping by the end of that walkthrough, it'll become a little more clear what everything's going to look like. And of course, if you have questions as we go along, we've got the chat box, or if you prefer to unmute, Ellie and I are both here to answer whatever questions are coming up as we're talking through it. And again, because we're such a lovely small community of preceptors, there's a great opportunity to share ideas amongst each other if the mood strikes you, because many of you have been involved with our program before and you have great lived experiences of supporting students. And even though these year 3 placements are new, the whole concept of supporting students is not entirely different from what we've done over the years. So there's a neat opportunity for that too. So I wanted to reshare something I've shared quite a few times if you've been to any of our other webinars or sessions that we've hosted. This is a snapshot of what our new practice education model is looking like for our students. And so we're beginning this new model in May 2022. So the students that you're going to be working with in this upcoming placement are at the beginning of this journey that you see here on the slide. They're going to have this 6-week placement in their 3rd year. So right now is actually the last week of classes. So I'm sure students are feeling pretty excited about that. They're finishing up all their coursework. Exams start next week. And so there'll be a few weeks between the end of exam period for these students and when they actually start this practicum placement. So that'll be the time where we'll probably end up doing a lot of the logistical communication, both with you and with the students to get things set up. Because, you know, understandably, students are pretty fully focused on their exams in the next couple of weeks. So that's going to be a really nice time to engage with these students, because hopefully everyone will be feeling really excited about the summer and this first placement. So I'm expecting enthusiasm will be high for all of us. So again, not super relevant to our conversation today, but just for your interest, the year 4 and the year 5 is mapped out here as well in terms of what these students will experience in the subsequent years of the program. So not too much to say about this slide, it's more just for your information. I will say if you've been involved with our program over the years, it is roughly the same number of practice education weeks and hours. We've just split it up differently. So that might be useful information to know. So I've alluded to this December 2021 meet and greet, I believe I titled it. It did feel like a really nice meet and greet opportunity. What did we talk about? In case you forgot, if you were there or if you weren't there, this is just a little bit of a snapshot of what we discussed at that time. And again, I'll sort of build on these details today, but if you're really craving the answers to these questions, I will re-share the recording and the slide deck. The slide deck is quite short, so it's pretty easy to briefly flick through. The recording's about 38 minutes. So it's a little bit more of a commitment of time, but Yep, there's a bit of a menu of options there for you to choose from. And I will say I'm sharing a lot of this by email, which is not ideal because emails get lost easily. We're really just trying to reimagine our website at the moment. We did a pretty big revamp over the summer. So our intention is that these materials that I'm talking about for preceptors today is we'll likely put a nice curated selection on the website because obviously they're there all the time. It's much easier to access them. So if you're wondering why we don't have some of these materials on the website, we're just not quite there yet. We're trying to be a little bit more thoughtful and intentional because there was a lot of stuff there before. So we're trying to take everything down and kind of repopulate with a smaller, more useful number of things. So in case that was on your mind. So to kick off this journey that we're going to take through what these placements are going to look like, I just wanted to start with just a couple of really high level points about what this year 3 placement is really meant to achieve. So the word introductory, I think, is a really good word to keep in mind. Certainly our year 3 students, they're earlier on in their learning journey. They've just completed their first year of coursework in the dietetics program. So it's going to be a different type of vibe and a different type of intention to what we've been doing in our year 5 placements, which are at the end of the program. So I just wanted us all to keep that word introductory in mind. And that will really flow through as I'm telling you what the plans are for the placement, like how we've designed the learning outcomes, how we've designed like what the students should actually be reasonably expected to achieve when they're with you. So I think that's a really nice word for us to just keep in our brains as we're talking through things today. And then the other points that you see here, I mean, the second theme is really something we hope for in all of our placements, but certainly with learners who are a little bit more early on in their journey, you know, there's more nervousness, lack of confidence is certainly a theme, not just in dietetics, but in really any student who's earlier on and doing a placement for the first time. So I think really keeping in mind that that's really a need that students are going to have at this stage, even more so than some of the year 5 placements, is just really, you know, that supportive kind of feel in the environment. And I know everyone's more than capable of doing that. So hopefully that's just not something that is too mind-blowing as a concept. And then the third piece here that I wanted just to touch on is a real shift that we're experimenting with, really trying to attend to the feedback from preceptors over time, just how burdensome evaluation and hands-on teaching can be in placements. We can certainly relate to that from having been involved with the program for many years and also having been preceptors ourselves. It is a huge amount of work. So we are experimenting. We've got myself and Ali and our other 2 educators, Tamar and Gordon. We're going to be a team of 4 co-instructors. So we have a lot more capacity in this new model to actually teach the students directly. So the students are going to be with us every Friday. They won't need to be on site at all. And also we're going to experiment with actually some direct evaluation of the students ourselves to complement what you're seeing when the students are with you in placement. So as I go through week by week, hopefully it'll become a little bit more clear how we're going to do that. So we're really excited. This is very, very big change from what we've ever done in the past. And we've been inspired by some of the teaching and learning literature and just really felt that if we really wanted to support you better as preceptors, we needed to do something pretty different to achieve that. So we're excited that you're going to come along on that journey with us. All right, let the journey begin. There is a lot of text here. This is actually taken directly from that course syllabus that I referenced. I tried to jazz it up with some colorful bubbles to make it a little nicer to look at. I did want to leave the details here for you so that you could go back and read it later if you like. And the reason I've also just pasted directly from the syllabus is I just wanted there to be complete transparency between what the students are seeing and what you're seeing. So this is exactly the same information the students get. I see Erin's popped in here. Yes, you can definitely have the syllabus if you like. We didn't include it with the material so far. It's really long, about 10 pages, but we can absolutely share it. Maybe because I'm going to be sharing a lot of materials with you already. If you're interested in the syllabus, maybe just like send me a quick email at some point and I'll just share it with people who want it. Just try not to overwhelm you with too many things. But yes, in the spirit of just really aligning what you're hearing as preceptors and what students are hearing, this is exactly the same as what we're sharing with them. So let's take this journey together. So this is week 1 of the course. So this is the week of May 16th. Just imagine we're all there right now. A couple short weeks from now, days are getting longer. Hopefully we're enjoying the sunshine a little more than we are now. So this is going to be a week where the students are going to be with us a little bit more than the rest of the course. We really just want to make sure that students are set up with all the orientation needs for whatever specific sites they're going to be at. So we're going to try and do a lot of that ahead of time if we can, but we recognize in that first week, there just might be some things that that come to our attention that the students need to do. Maybe they need to sign up for a training session or something at the site, or maybe there's some paperwork they need to fill out. So we just wanted to really create some space in that first week just to hopefully make that as seamless and as supported as possible. So the students are going to be with us via Zoom, because students are going to be all over the province. So all of the UBC-led days are going to be on Zoom, which I think we're all used to by now. In a perfect world, we would love to all be together in person, but Zoom does have some advantages too in terms of being able to bring us all together in different spaces. So the Monday and the Friday, the students are going to be with us. I see your question, Karen. Let me just attend to that before we move on to the next slide, because that's going to come in probably in this conversation of week 1. So I won't say all of these bullets in detail here because you can see them, but our role as instructors is to kind of set the tone for the course, set the tone for what's expected of the students. So we'll be talking through, what is the placement setting, and what do you need to talk to your preceptors about, and how do you have conversations about expectations. There's going to be several assignments that we've embedded into the course, which again are not really meant to be academic and extra workload for the students. They're meant to be things that will help them get the most out of their time in the placement setting. So for example, we've noted assignment number 1 and assignment number 4 here. Assignment number 1 is really just going to be a little bit of a structured guide for the students so they can have a little bit of insight into how they should do a nutrition assessment. So in my mind, I was kind of thinking of the language of almost like a scavenger hunt, like where do you go to find information if you're assessing a patient or a client or a resident? Where would you need to find the rest of the teammates that you would need to talk to? Like really just gentle prompts. And you can certainly give them some ideas as well as to how are they going to go about just doing an assessment for the first time. That's an example of what some of the assignments will look like. And a lot of this first week is just going to be gentle, getting to know who the teammates are, meeting you. There's room for some job shadowing in this first week, just getting the students settled and starting to get their feet wet and what it actually feels like to be in a placement. That's really the focus of the first week. So for Karen's question, who's going to organize the site orientations? So we're going to take on the majority of that from the UBC side. So we have been involved in orientation in some fashion for quite some time. And certainly for those of you who work for health authorities, there's some pretty good structure as to what health authorities require in terms of modules that need to be completed and confidentiality agreements that need to be signed and whatnot. So we will aim to get the students to do as much of that before they arrive as we can. And then, in terms of your role as a preceptor, it would be more along the lines of like just introducing them to your teammates and showing them, if you have office space, I know not everyone has an office, like where that is, like really kind of how you might, oh, here's Erin. Okay, Erin, I'll finish my sentence. Kind of how you might just like orient someone to cover for you, kind of that sort of intention. Go for it, Erin. Feel free to unmute. Oh, maybe you're still muted, Erin. I can see you're on your phone with the audio. Oh, maybe you're talking to someone else. Okay. Any other questions about what I've shared so far about week 1, sort of what this whole sort of getting students used to the placement setting is going to look like?
Hi, Kara. This is Erin Brown.
Hi, Erin.
I know we'd meant to talk about orientation, so thanks for clarifying that. Will you be providing the health authorities a list of what modules you'll be giving the students? Or can you do that?
So we'll just be aligning with whatever, like for Fraser, for as just an example, like we'll just be aligning with what the health authorities want for all students. So this might not be familiar to some folks, like there's a whole general curriculum called FECO. We'll be getting them to do all of that. I know, Erin, we've chatted about like Fraser has a lot of stuff that's not really relevant to dietetics. So we might need to just reconnect on that and just pick through like what we should guide students to specifically do on the general Fraser Health practice education websites, similar to other health authorities as well. We will probably, connect in. Erin, you're sort of the natural point person for Fraser, but for some of the other health authorities, the managers, your managers will be who we'll connect with directly on that. We won't have to sort of liaise with you. Some of you work for long-term care sites where you might be able to tell us directly, like if there's people we need to talk to or things that need to be done. So again, we're probably going to start sorting all those details in the next 2 weeks or so, and then the students will actually do all of those things once their exams are finished, kind of late April, early May.
Sounds great. Thank you.
So yeah, Erin, we might need to like pick up that chat again because I know we were talking through it a couple months ago now that things are getting closer. And just looking at the chat here. Oh yes, you've actually picked up, Erin W. You've picked up on a question about assessment and charting that I was going to speak to because we did talk about it in December. Did I have it on this slide or was it on the next one? Yes, there's my note right there. So timely. Karen, you've asked if you can pass on what site orientation students are doing. Yeah, we can definitely, we actually post everything for students like within courses. We have this platform called Canvas. So yeah, we'll just have to figure out the nuts and the bolts of how to show you what the students are doing. But yeah, we can absolutely just make sure that awareness is there. And again, one of the key intentions of all of our practice education courses is that it's very student directed. So the students can tell you and should tell you, and they'll be prompted many times by us to really make sure that they're telling you what they need to do in the placement. But just because this is all a little bit new for everyone, we can definitely point you to the content we're creating and where we're directing the students for orientation. I'll put that on my to-do list. Let's go to Erin W's question. So we had a really good conversation in December about like, should students actually be charting? So one of the key learning outcomes for the year 3 students, because they haven't done all of their coursework in the program yet, is really we just want them, in terms of nutrition care skills, we really want them to just focus on doing assessments. So the natural question came up of like, well, where should they document those assessments? Like, should they put it in the patient chart? Should they not? And our original thought was that we really didn't want to over focus on the charting documentation skill set because it's a little bit early in their learning for that. But upon thinking about that a little bit further, the students could definitely document their assessments in the actual patient chart. If that makes sense for you, you all have different charting systems. So we didn't want to have like a hard and fast expectation for everyone. Really, the intention is we don't want it to make a lot more work for you if the student is documenting in the chart, like, because as the dietitian, if you're directing the student to do an assessment, presumably you'll need to actually review that assessment and provide some care for that person. So if it really works for you to have the student put their assessment into the official patient record, that's fine. The other way, if that just doesn't make sense with the charting system that you have, you could just have them like use a piece of paper and just document, their assessment notes on a piece of paper, or if you have a paper form, and then they could have a handover conversation with you if you think it would be better to just do all the documentation yourself. So we're pretty flexible on what you think is going to work best. And I think upon second thought, we will just make sure students are trained for all the charting systems around all of your sites. Like if there are formal Like I'm thinking Vancouver Coastal for sure. There's formal training sessions students need to do to get access to the documentation systems. We'll just get them all set up for that so that they have the ability to actually do the charting if you want them to. That's a pretty lengthy answer. I hope that was sort of the information you were craving, Aaron W. I'm gonna refer to you as Aaron W and Aaron B. Sure you're used to that. Were there any more questions on that? Because that was a really good conversation point that came up when we spoke in December. Yeah, I think so, Aaron. Yeah, that again, they wouldn't do the whole nutrition care plan, but I think that makes sense if they open the note and just do the assessment piece and then you sign off the entire piece once you've done your extra bits. I think that would work fine. Yeah, and this is, I think, one where we're really keen to get feedback this time around to see how that goes. Because again, just having students focus on assessment is a new thing. That's not what we do in year 5. Obviously, the students are really guided to care for the patients or clients or residents in full. So we're just curious to see if this ends up being, the right focus that's feasible for you. So we are really keen to hear your feedback as we go through this process. We're just mindful of not wanting to set the expectation too high for these year 3 students. So doing the entire care process, we were just a little wary that that might be too much to ask of students and therefore would put too much on you as a preceptor to have to guide them through that. But that's really going to be a learning process this time around. So great questions so far. Keep them coming. Let's keep the journey going. So week 2, lots of bullet points here. So week 2, Monday's a stat holiday. So the calendar shakes out quite nicely that the students won't be with you on the Monday because I presume many of you won't be working. So the students will be with you Tuesday to Thursday this week as well, and then with us on Friday. And so to kind of just give you a high level without getting into all these bullet points too specifically, we anticipated that, because the students are only with you 3 days in week 1, there might still be some kind of orientation type things that you feel they need to do in terms of like if they couldn't get a training session for something in the first week, maybe that needs to get scheduled in the second week. We can really help broker all of that if that comes up. And again, I think just recognizing that this is meant to be an introductory, gentle kind of a placement, there's still a lot of room to do pretty introductory things in the second week, like job shadowing might still be a really good fit for part of the day so that the students can get a real feel for how you work and some of the communication skills you utilize. We're also directing the students to start in week 2. We are wanting them to just get some sort of insight into how food service weaves in to your work. So depending on where you are, there might be a food service manager or supervisor who would be an appropriate person for the student to reach out to. So we're wanting the students to take the lead on this. And so essentially it could be as simple as, them just asking you, like, who's responsible for food services at this site and who should I contact? And then they could take the lead on emailing that person and just seeing if that person would be willing to either just have a little conversation with the student, or maybe they could have a tour. Again, we're pretty flexible on what this looks like, but just really, this is meant to be just, again, an introductory experience for students to understand like how the health system works. So that seemed like a really relevant thing to get the students to do. And it doesn't have to be in the second week, but we thought we would prompt the students earlier on in the placement to start looking into this. And so again, the nutrition assessment skill is one that the students will practice over and over again. And so again, we've just prompted them here. That's starting to, slowly maybe do that a little bit more independently would be appropriate in week 2. And again, we've just, put some prompts here in terms of the types of things that are involved in nutrition assessment, which will probably all look familiar to you. Some of the other learning outcomes are really oriented around communication and teamwork as well. So there's lots of room for, the students to come to team meetings or rounds, just for them to really get a feel for how does the team interact with each other, who does what. This is their first real life experience to actually meet and see other interprofessional team members in action. So lots of really great learning there for them to just get a feel for, what is the scope and role of the teammates and how does everyone work together. I've also put a prompt here, and again, these are all kind of offerings. Not everyone has to do all of these things, but certainly observing the students for you as the preceptor is a really fantastic teaching technique, which is a good one to probably try and integrate into these early weeks of the placements, just so you can get a feel for what their skills are actually looking like and you can give some feedback. Again, obviously observing the students all day for 6 weeks is not what we're looking for, but we just wanted to prompt you and the students that actually watching them do some assessments early on can be a really rich learning opportunity for everyone involved. And then on Friday, I wanted to just make mention of how we're really trying to enhance our whole program approach to talking about truth and reconciliation, talking about racism in healthcare. These are really big, important topics that we haven't really probably done the best job of explicitly addressing throughout the program. So we are experimenting with adding some more explicit content into this first practicum course. So you'll see here in the blue bubble, we have a decolonizing dietetics reading list, which I think I've mentioned in many of our other webinars. But again, if you're curious about that, we can point you to it on our website. We're wanting to plan some specific assignments and sessions just to get students thinking and observing and reflecting on, like, what does equity look like in the healthcare system? And so this can be a pretty big topic and can be somewhat intimidating for all of us. So I wanted to make mention of it here today because certainly the intention is not for students to be, coming and being overly critical of anything they see, but we did want to invite them to just ask your thoughts and questions as members of the health system. Like, what does this look like to you? Do you have any observations yourself from working in healthcare? So we did want to prime you that we're going to be guiding students just to have conversations with you. And we don't expect anyone to be perfect around this, but this is our first foray at really trying to talk more explicitly with students about how some of these really areas for improvement in the health system with regard to oppression and equity, how we're going to sort of move forward to support students to deal with those issues as they graduate and become professionals. So we're starting off that conversation in week 2 and then moving on to week 3. We are actually going to have a workshop facilitated by a colleague of ours to dive into some reflective practice on what does decolonizing dietetic practice look like. So we're really excited about that. And again, that's probably going to just bring up some really good discussion points that the students might want to pick your brains about as they come back to placement. So we're already in week 3 here on this slide, so we're almost halfway through the course. Certainly feels like it's going fast as I'm presenting it, and probably feel like it's going fast once it's actually happening as well. So I've spoken about evaluation quite a few times and our hopes and intentions to really simplify that for students and for preceptors. So as you can see in the orange bubble, when the students are with you in this 3rd week, we're already prompting them to talk to you about the midpoint placement process. So we've kind of planned in like a check-in, midpoint placement evaluation, and then a final evaluation. And if you've ever been involved in our program before, you'll surely remember that the evaluation process is quite lengthy and quite involved. And we've really decided to just take all of that away and rethink the process completely. So I did make mention of this in December as well, and I'll just share a few details again. We're really going a very different direction with evaluation. It's going to be a very simple process in a very simple form. It's 2 pages. It doesn't have any numerical rating scales like we've had before to assess performance. It's a very qualitative conversational approach. So the student will tell you that a midpoint placement evaluation needs to happen. That's the first step. And then the student will actually fill out this 2-page form themselves. So full disclosure, it might end up being longer than 2 pages once they've filled it out. But again, we're going to guide the students, and we're actually going to do like a little bit of an activity on one of the Fridays with them to kind of coach them through how to fill it out so that they'll feel confident coming to you with it. So the student is going to fill it out and then just really initiate a conversation with you. So making a little bit of time to actually talk through the form with them and share your feedback. That's the real preceptor role in the process. So I'm just, yeah, I see Aaron's question there. Let me just get through this next little thought first, but I haven't forgot about you there, Aaron. Yeah, so that's like a key thing that's coming up around week 3 is students really letting you know about this midpoint placement evaluation, and that will be led by them. Some of the other activities that we've plotted in here that seem to make sense mid-course is, again, to help students really get a good feel for how do teams work. We've directed them to get in touch with 2 of your teammates. It can be anyone on the team of their choosing, or if you have suggestions for them. And again, just reach out to them and say, you know, could I talk to you? Could I observe you, just to learn what your role is like, so that they have a chance to shadow some of your teammates and just get a feel for what their roles are, and reflect on that in comparison to what the dietitian's role is. So that'll be an activity that the students, again, can direct themselves and initiate, and that'll free up some of your time as a preceptor as well, because, you know, depending on your teammates' willingness and availability, they could go spend half a day or a full day with someone if they were keen. But it also could just be a half an hour conversation if your teammates don't have time for that. It's pretty flexible. And then we're wanting to experiment to see how students can possibly start doing some practice with nutrition diagnosis. So we've plotted in here that we'd like them to, again, they will have already observed you doing the whole nutrition care process, but we want them to start thinking about, like, what's the next step after assessment? We haven't formally expected them to be able to demonstrate that they can do nutrition diagnosis by themselves by the end of this placement. But we just wanted them to really, you know, if it feels right and if they're doing well, like, get a feel for, you know, maybe they could write some PES statements on their own and then run them by you. So I think it'll be really great. And we'll feel this out when we're with the students on the Fridays as well, to see, like, you know, are most students ready for this, or are they really just needing to keep practicing assessment? So we wanted to make some space for that without setting the expectation too high. So that's sort of what that piece is about. I'm coming back to Aaron W now. Will the students be asked to email a week or 2 before the placement? Yes, we will direct them to do that, unless that doesn't work for anyone. But we don't want them to email you now because it's too early, but we will direct them to email closer to when it's top of mind. Fabulous. Anything else? I'll take a pause there because we are changing colors. We're in the second half. How exciting. Just keep my eye on the chat here and the time. Things are looking good. All right, let's keep going. So we're in a different color scheme now. Just wanted to keep creating some visual interest for you and keep you awake if this is all feeling like a bit much. So we're in June now. I look forward to June, one of my favorite months. So the previous week, this is week 4 of the placement. So the previous week, the students are putting on your radar as preceptors that this evaluation process is happening. So we've actually given them a due date now of when we wanted them to actually have had a conversation with you and show you their completed form. And that would be the end of the week that they're with you. So by the Thursday. And then, of course, the students are going to be with us on the Friday. So that is a key activity. And again, the previous version of our evaluation forms took many hours. Again, we're just really finalizing the instructions on the evaluation form, but I would anticipate, like, a conversation with each student, really maybe about 45 minutes is probably the ballpark to aim for. Of course, you know, every person's a little different in how much or how little they like to be in conversation on these topics. So, you know, it doesn't have to be 45 minutes, but just really wanted to give you some framework there so that, you know, you don't have to spend half your day talking through this form with the students. Probably 45 minutes-ish is a good ballpark, depending on how much agreement you come to on what the student has written. That's always an interesting point, which you're welcome to be in touch with us anytime about if you're just really concerned about how that's playing out. And so in the second half of the placement, again, students hopefully by week 4 are going to be getting a pretty good feel for your placement setting, hopefully starting to feel a little bit more confident. And that's where I think the fun can really come in terms of, you know, do you want to push the students a little bit more and have them practice some diagnosis and maybe even, like, give you a synopsis of what an intervention might be. Maybe that might feel right, or there's still plenty of space for them to keep practicing their assessment skills. Maybe they could, speak up in a team meeting if it feels right. Again, just really wanting to give lots of space, lots of unrushed time for students to practice these skills throughout the 6 weeks. And then again, we just are reminding students that they have, these meetings that they should be having with interprofessional team members. So we've just carried some of those prompts through, so students are actually following through with that. And then actually I haven't mentioned this of late on the last few slides. You might notice the student-led case debriefs in small groups has popped up for several of the weeks. This is actually something we've been doing for a lot of years in year 5, which has been a really fantastic experience. We call them dietetic dialogue sessions. And really what we've been doing is we've been asking students to basically just bring a summary of somebody they worked with that week. It doesn't have to be like a formal presentation, but we're wanting to do, I can sort of maybe make an analogy to at least myself when I was a clinician, like a debrief you might do with a colleague on how you approached the care with that person. That's kind of the spirit that we've been doing with students over the last several years. It's a really fantastic way to help students build their critical thinking skills, to have them describe, like, this is how I did the assessment, and these are the things I was thinking when I was working with this person, and having them reflect on, what might they have done differently, what might the other options have been. So we're going to integrate this in throughout the course, and one of the assignments is that the students will have to identify a real person that they're working with in your setting. So they might ask you for some advice on that, but it should be simple, low barrier, just someone they did an assessment with. It doesn't have to be like, someone with this really unique diagnosis. It just needs to be a real person that they did an assessment with. And so they're going to need to come to the Friday classes with us, and we're going to have a schedule of when every student group is going to present. And then they'll just need to talk us through a structured debrief, and we're going to provide some guidance for the students on what that looks like. Erin, you've got so many questions. I love it. They're so good. Is each student going to do a debrief? So they're going to work together on it. And again, that was kind of intentional, because thinking of your time as preceptors, like the students could go off for a couple hours and work on this together if they wanted to. And then that would free up your time as well. And it is a bit of an intimidating thing to ask students to do. So we did just want it to be a little bit more gentle. So, and they're in pairs. So we thought that might be kind of neat. The way we do it right now, every student does it individually, but we thought we would make this a paired activity as a way to free up your time, and also just to help the students dip their toe in a little more gently. So just wanted to give you a heads up about that, because they might talk to you about these debriefs that they're doing, but it really shouldn't require any work from you. It's apart from, they might just say, well, who should I pick? And you're hearing it from us, like it could be anyone. It's not really about the actual case itself. It's really about the process of them debriefing their interactions with the person. So just gonna put that out there now, because we had a version of this activity in some older versions of our program, and what we're doing this time is meant to be quite different. And then the Fridays, I think what will be really interesting is we've left a bit more open space for students to tell us like what they might want to focus on. It's definitely something that resonates with our teaching team, as something we value, is not overscheduling the UBC days too much, because there's some really interesting, priorities or cravings that different student cohorts have. And we just wanted to really, create a little bit of space on the Fridays in the second half of the course. And, maybe we might bring in a different guest speaker if that makes sense, if there's interest. So the Fridays are a little bit less structured for the second half of the course. And then that might be interesting, like if we're hearing feedback from any of you on something you think the students need, if you drop us an email or something, there's some space for us to try and address things. So we're hoping that will be useful this time around. So getting closer to the end here. So week 5, seems like you probably just did the midpoint evaluation, but it's already time to start talking about the end of placement evaluation. So again, in week 5, the student should be bringing up to you again that you need to do the end of placement evaluation again, and it's going to be the same form, same process. So it's not really any more elaborate than what you did the first time around, but obviously there'll probably be different conversation points given that you're getting closer to the end of the experience together. And I should have made explicit mention of this before, but the intention is that the evaluation would be for each student independently, which maybe that is intuitive, but probably worth saying. So having one meeting with each student is what we would envision. And again, by week 5, like we've got a lot of similar themes here. Like week 5, again, students are getting closer to the end. So just much more consolidation of skills, continuing to practice. And that's where you can sort of gauge where you think they're at and if they're ready to go further and practice doing care for a whole person. If that feels right, maybe that's something you want to invite them to do. We don't have an expectation that the students need to do that, but everyone progresses at different rates in their learning. So just there is some space to customize that a little bit if you think the students are doing really, really well and they might be ready for that. Tiffany's popped in here. Hi, Tiffany. Will the evaluation form be shared ahead of time with the preceptors? Yeah, that's the piece we're just working out. Right now, I think we have the student share it with the preceptor a few days beforehand. These are the details that we're just finalizing. I think because your role as preceptors will not be as elaborate, like you won't have to write quite as much. It might work okay for them to just arrive at the meeting with this form filled out and you talk through it together. Or maybe it might make sense for us to guide them to send it to you a day or two before. Does anyone have any like strong preferences on that they want to put in the chat? Like, would you crave seeing their filled out form before, or would you be fine just them bringing it to you on the day and talking through it? If you have a thought one way or the other. Okay.
This is Erin. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Perfect. Okay, I switched phones.
Nice.
I'm wondering about getting it ahead of time just so that we can see what exactly we're evaluating them against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely, I mean, I can show it to you today. I just, we're doing well for time, but I'll maybe finish up the slides. And I'm seeing a bit of a vibe here that many of you would value seeing the blank form. So yeah, we're just finalizing a few of the instructions because the piece we still haven't come to consensus on our team is how do we want to direct you, like as preceptors, if you're concerned about something, like what process do we want to enact there? Like, do we want you to write it on the form? Do we want you to just get in touch with us? Like, that's the fine detail we haven't totally agreed on yet, but I'm seeing many of you would like to see the blank form. So I can send you the like 98% finalized version that we have with all the other things I'm going to send you. And then another thing we could try is like the student could just show you the blank form in week 1. Like, is that helpful or convenient? Just so you're aware. Again, as you can probably tell from this conversation, we're pretty open to what you think will work best. Karen's okay to just see it when it comes. Want to see it. I'm seeing, yeah, a little bit of a critical mass of those of you who would love to see it before. Yeah, okay, so let me just stop yammering on here and keep the progress going because I'll show it to you right now if we have a couple extra minutes, but I'll definitely attach it after so you can see. It's very simple compared to what we used to have. So I hope you'll like that. Okay, thanks for your thoughts, everyone. It's been really convenient to pull your thoughts live. Hopefully I didn't miss too many. I'll go back and read the chat after. Make sure I didn't miss any key points here. Okay, so the final week. I'd say the spirit of the final week of any of our placements is, you know, if problems are occurring, we really hope that everyone's aware of them well before we arrive at the final week. And so that's going to be a key intention of our role as well, is to really ensure you feel supported and that you have just a good access to us to let us know if you think things are maybe not going well, like well before we arrive at the last week. Because really the last week is meant to be quite celebratory in nature, and it should be focused on wrapping things up. Certainly when the students are with us on the last day, we're not going to be introducing any new concepts or new content unless the students really want to dive into something. We've made a little space for that, but really things should be pretty solidified and procedural by this point. So certainly the actual conversation and completion of that evaluation form is a key task for the last week. And then a lot of the other intentions for what the student should be doing is really just solidifying and practicing those same skills that they've been practicing throughout the whole 6 weeks with you. And again, some of the students might be just wrapping up some of their assignments and have some questions for you. So I've mentioned 3 out of the 4 assignments: the case debrief, the little mini nutrition assessment assignment in the first week. The other, actually, I mentioned 2 out of the 4. The other 2, again, they're meant to be student-led, and we're going to be doing all the marking of the assignments. That's how we're going to contribute to evaluating the students, is that we're actually going to be seeing these assignments they've completed so we can get a gauge on some of their skills that might be harder for you to assess, like some of their critical thinking skills and some of their reflective practice skills, which sometimes aren't quite as obvious when you're just observing students, do assessments and communicate with team members. So that's a real mechanism that we're going to use. So the evaluation feedback that you give us will be used alongside the evaluation that we're doing of the students when we're with them every Friday, and then the actual formal assignments. So the other 2 assignments I haven't mentioned, we're going to have them do just a reflective writing assignment based on their observations and thoughts and the readings that they're looking at with regard to equity and truth and reconciliation, and just themes of, lack of equity that they might observe in the placement setting. As you can tell from me explaining it, we're still narrowing down exactly what we want them to do in this writing assignment, but we want them to be thinking about and writing their reflections on what they're seeing in practice, and where there might be opportunities for our whole healthcare system to move towards a more equitable way of providing care. So again, they might just have some curiosities for you on your experiences in the health system, but essentially they'll write that on their own and they'll submit it to us, and we'll kind of evaluate that on our team. And then the other assignment we're wanting to have them do is just, we're still refining this as well. We're thinking we want them to do a SWOT analysis. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. It stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's a pretty widely used leadership tool. So we wanted to get them to try doing one of those because it might be a tool that they use in their practice down the road. So we wanted to get them to do a SWOT analysis around their observations of team functioning in whatever context that they're in, whether it be a hospital or a long-term care facility. So that'll be an interesting thing for them to go through, is to really assess the teams that they're working with and what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of that. And again, don't really see too much of a role for you as preceptors. Just wanted to let you know that that's what they'll be doing. And so, they'll be observing the team members and putting that together in their own minds, and then they'll submit that to us. So we're still, again, pretty sure we're keen on the SWOT, but we might change the format of that. But the intention there is just to get them demonstrating that they're reflecting on teamwork and their role in teams and what they're seeing in the health system. So that's the assignment piece of the puzzle, which is sort of adjacent to this evaluation conversation that we've been having. I have one more slide for you to kind of wrap things up and let you know what's happening next. And then I might have a minute or so to just put the evaluation form up on the screen share for you. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a real lived sense of how the students are going to progress through the weeks and what things are going to look like, what your role will be, the student's role, and what our role is going to be. So orientations come up a few times. So there's this system called HSPNet, which many of you have probably never heard of, but it's basically a placement request system that the whole province uses for health authorities primarily. So we've been putting all of the placements and student names in there, and that will actually trigger some of the orientation items for some of your sites. So that's what we're going to work through in the next couple of weeks, is sorting all of that out on the back end to start getting the orientation activities sorted for each of the students. We will share your names. Placements are still changing a little bit, so we're holding off just a little bit longer in case there's any other changes in preceptors. So our thought is that we'll probably share your names and email addresses with the students that are going to be with you probably towards the end of April. Again, students are doing exams as of next week, so we want to support them to just get through that, and then contacting you after that's done in late April probably makes the most sense. So that's what you can expect to hear from students, to ask where should I go on the first day, and Is there anything I should or shouldn't wear? And, just generally introduce themselves. One thing I've mentioned before and just wanted to share again is that we're so grateful for your involvement in placements, and one mechanism we have to recognize that is appointing you as official UBC clinical instructors. So that's something we are going to do for all of you. Some of you might already be clinical instructors, so we're going to check into that. Ali and I are kind of teaming up on that piece. There's a couple of fine logistics. The takeaway is you probably won't have to do anything apart from perhaps provide some just basic information and a resume for the UBC HR system. So we just need to figure out when that needs to happen. Anything more to say on that, Ali? You've been definitely supporting that process.
No, I don't think so. We'll email you probably mid-April, which is coming up next week. So, mid to late April, just to get all this information in our system too. Like Kara said, it's not too detailed, but there's like a little bit of kind of administrative stuff that the UBC kind of HR system just needs for you to have. And you are absolutely welcome to just opt out of it as well if you don't want to, but it's a pretty simple kind of process just to get you in the system, and then you get access to a bunch of other UBC resources as well.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be in touch, and we've had a pretty elaborate process for that over the years. And again, our real intention right now is streamlining and really saving everyone time. So I think this will be pretty straightforward as we do this for you. So yeah, we'll be in touch on that. As you've probably gathered from what I've shared with you today, like a lot of the details are pretty final, but there's a couple things we're still ironing out. So we're going to be spending the next several weeks as a team just really ironing out those assignments, selecting any relevant readings or resources that we want to share, and just really refining those plans for what the Fridays are going to look like. I did make brief mention, but I'll just share again that we have 4 of us on our team who are going to be co-instructing this course. So we're going to split the whole class into small student cohorts. So each of us will have about 8 to 10 students. So I will have 8 to 10 students, Ali will, and so will Tamar and Gordon. And so we're going to have various point people. So if the students, I just see Joanne's face. So if the students in my cohort are with Joanne and Megan, then I'll be your point person for the whole placement. So we're just going to play with that a little bit so that we are all maximally available to all of you, because there's 4 of us, so we can really split our time and just make sure that we are all connecting with just smaller groups of preceptors. If you need to be in touch with us with any concerns, or if you want to clarify any of the expectations. So even though I've been doing most of the talking today, we'll definitely connect smaller groups of you with one of us once we decide which students are going to be in which cohort. I believe I'll be sorting that next week. And then the final thing I just wanted to share with you, which is an offering, it's not mandatory, is we just thought, this is our last orientation session, but it'd be really nice to have a venue to chat with you and check in while the course is actually running. So we just plotted in June 3rd as an opportunity. If you're keen and you want to just drop in, like I'm tempted to call it coffee hour, even though it might end up being more like lunchtime, just as an opportunity if you just wanted to talk through what's going on in the placement with us and share some ideas with each other. We're going to set up a Zoom, and that's just an open offering if you want to connect with us in that way. And I think with that, we might have a minute or two. I'll keep my eye on the chat, but I'm going to just screen share the evaluation form with you, and then I will attach it with all of the other materials that I promised by email. So just bear with me for a second here while I switch my screen share. And feel free to unmute or add to the chat. Ali's here too, so Ali's just as capable as I at answering your questions while I quickly show you the evaluation form. I will stop the share for a second. And I will say, since we're finalizing a few things, it has a few track changes on it still, which I'm just going to take off so that's actually possible to read. That might make this process a lot more useful. So let me just show this to you. for a moment here before we sign off. Always fun doing this in real time. All right. So you should all now be seeing this Word document. It's not too fancy, but I'm going to do a slow scroll. You won't be able to get all the details out of it in 2 minutes. But just wanted to give you a general sense. So there's instructions at the top, which again, we're just wanting to refine the best way to clearly support you as preceptors on mostly what to do if you have concerns, whether we want you to write that on this form. I mean, really the core intention is anytime you're having even the slightest sense of you're not sure how the student might be doing, just reach out to us, and you can reach out to the team member who's the lead for your cohort. We love hearing from you, and even if it just doesn't feel like an issue yet, just don't hesitate, just get in touch. But essentially, so the course has learning outcomes. That's really what you're assessing the students' performance on, is these 7 learning outcomes. And then again, we've just tried to keep it very simple and qualitative. Like the student will just write out examples of how they demonstrated the learning outcome and note areas they might need to keep doing some further development. So very simple, very different from what we've done before. And so this is where, they'll come to you with this filled out and talk through what they've written with you. And this is where you can, in conversation with them, add to it. And that's where I think we just want to figure out, like, do we want a separate preceptor section? We just wanted to keep this very simple and low barrier. So our leaning is that we might just have you be in conversation with the student and you can kind of co-edit it together if you have things you want to add. But I think that's what we're going to talk about next week. But again, we'll make all of this really clear on the final version of this. It's not going to change too much from what you see here. So it's probably useful if you want to really take your own time with this and have a look. I can send it to you with all the other materials that I said I would share. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a sense. And again, in our previous program model, all of the evaluation responsibility was on the preceptor, and that's really what we're wanting to shift. So the comments that come from that form, we will ultimately make the decision as course instructors, like if the student has passed the placement or not. So we're taking that burden off of you from having to even make that judgment. Really, your role is just to give feedback on those learning outcomes. And then we'll really take that alongside the evaluation that we're doing with the students too when they're with us on Fridays and through their assignments. So we're wanting to just relieve some burden of that responsibility and share the load with you. So this is the first time we're trying it that way. I'm sure we'll all learn a lot. And with that, it's 3 o'clock. I hope that was helpful. Oh, Erin, love it. Thanks. Love the comment. Co-edit. Yeah, these are good thoughts. I'm going to save the chat so I'll have all this captured.